This is the Jewish Legacy podcast. This morning I'm interviewing Stephen J. Rosenberg. The date is June 7, 2019, and we're speaking in Raleigh, North Carolina. My name is Don McNeil. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Don.
I'd like to start this by getting some information about you. How would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Steve Rosenberg, like you said. I was born in Peoria, Illinois, December 16th, 1951. So right now I'm 67 years old. I'm the oldest of five children. My parents are Leonard and Ann Rosenberg, and my brothers and sisters. My brother Richard lives in Chicago. My sister Janet lives in Nashville. My brother Michael in Toronto, and my brother Mark lives in Peoria.
Okay. I think we should start with your parents. Let's start with your father, Leonard. Where was he born?
My dad was born in Pekin, Illinois, a very small rural town outside of Peoria. And his parents were Sam and Molly Rosenberg. And I just found out that my grandfather was actually born in Poland. My grandparents married in 1919. My grandmother was actually born in Des Moines, Iowa. And again, small town Jewish roots that are not that typical, to be honest with you. So my dad was born in Peoria, in Pekin, and he had a sister, Rosella, who's deceased, and my uncle Jack, who lives up in the Chicago area, and he's fortunately still with us and doing well.
Okay. And your father, can you tell us about his early childhood?
You know, I really don't have a lot of details about that. I know he worked in the store. My grandfather's seemed to be like a hardware store, odds and ends. The only thing I know for certain is my dad liked to play the drums, and he was playing drums from an early age. He graduated from Pekin High School, and well, after that he ended up in the Army in World War II. He was in dance bands, and he originally was a drummer in the Army band, and he got sent over to Europe, and he earned his Purple Heart. I really don't have a lot of details. My dad never said a word about anything like that.
The Purple Heart, do you know where he was shot?
Well, he was shot in the leg, but I don't know where. Actually, I found records. We found some records, but it was in Germany someplace, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. But my dad never mentioned a word about it, and he passed away in 1984. At the age of how old was he? 64 at the time.
Okay. Let's talk about jobs that he had after he left the Army.
From what I know, that he came back after the Army, after the service. He ended back up in Peoria, and he got a job with his older first cousin. My grandfather was part of a large extended family, and he got a job as a salesperson with his first cousin's furniture store, Cohen's Furniture, in downtown Peoria. and they expanded. It was a large operation, and that's where he spent all of his career there.
So it seems that he started in sales and became an executive with the furniture company.
Exactly.
Okay. Then he retired from that business.
My dad passed away before he reached full retirement.
Okay, I understand. Can you tell me how your dad met your mom?
From what I understand, my dad had a first cousin, Ray Ulovich, and she was married to Helen, and Helen was my mom's first cousin, and Helen was from Jefferson City, and Ray and Helen set them up, and I really, I guess 1950, and I really don't know what happened. They obviously got married very shortly after they met, but my mom, I'll have to ask my mom because I really don't have a lot of details.
Was your dad an affectionate person?
My dad was a very sociable person. Again, it was the typical father of the 1950s, 1960s. He wasn't that physical, emotional, but he provided us with a good living. My mom did not work. Nobody worked at that. No, very few women worked at that time. And like I said, with 5 kids, it's hard. Like you said, 5 kids. My dad's biggest recreation. Well, he liked to ride horses, but his biggest recreation was playing the drums. He used to have a big stereo system up on the attic and turn up the stereo so the whole neighbors could hear it, and he would play drums along with it. And this is way, way before anybody heard of karaoke.
I wonder if he ever had any aspirations to be a professional musician.
I think he did, but he never said anything to me.
Okay. Almost every musician has that aspiration. Your dad, what year did he die?
1984, March of 1984.
And he's buried in Peoria?
He's buried in Peoria.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about your mom. Your mom, her name was Ann?
Is Ann. Her name is Ann, and she is... she's from Jefferson City, Missouri. She is the oldest of 5, and all of her siblings are alive still. My mom, we just celebrated my mom's 90th birthday party last year, and a lot of family, a lot of cousins came in. We had about 50 people that came to Peoria, and my mom, a lot to be thankful for, is still sharp. She gets around, and she's active at her temple.
So it sounds like the DNA in your family favors longevity.
It seems that way. I'm hoping. My grandfather actually died at 70, and my grandfather from Jefferson City died at 70. My grandfather from Pekin, my dad's dad, died at 59. So I don't take the longevity for granted.
Okay, let's talk about your mom's early life. Do you know anything about her childhood?
Very little. She lived in Jefferson City, Missouri, as I mentioned, and again, a small, very very small Jewish community. Was a couple of relatives, cousins. My grandfather's sisters lived in Jefferson City, and my grandfather was born in Lithuania, but I'm not sure where. My mom's not sure where, and my grandmother. No, I've heard that she was born in America. I've also heard she was born in Russia. Nobody seems to know, and they passed away again several years ago. So,
Can you tell us about your mom's schooling?
well, my mom graduated from Jefferson High School in Jefferson City, and then went for 2 years to Stevens College, 30 miles away from Jefferson City, Columbia, Missouri. And she graduated from there. The only thing my mom's ever said about her schooling was that she felt anti-Semitism there. That she was like the first Jewish person who was at the school, and her father helped get her in there. But I really, again, it was a different era, and so that's really all I know.
Okay. So she attended 2 years of higher education, graduated from Stevens College, and after that, do you know what occupation she found?
Well, she worked with my grandfather in the retail store, and again, they had a little clothing store, Herman's Clothing Store in Jefferson City, right on the corner on a high street, about 2 blocks from the Missouri Capitol. And it's unlike anything that's out there today. It was a family owned, family operated. There was a number of people working there. And the memories I have, we went to Jefferson City about twice a year. It was about a 5-hour journey from Peoria on, at the time, 2-lane roads. And the memories I have of everybody in town knew my grandparents. And one of the fondest memories I have is in the summer, my grandparents would take us out to small communities in the area that were having big picnics, big fairs. And my grandfather would buy all the raffle tickets for the quilts. We used to have a lot of quilts, and playing bingo and things like that. But it's a time and place that seems so distant right now. Like, again, the idea of a small retail store where you knew your customers and were friendly with them and helped them out. My mother tells my grandfather was very well known for helping anybody who needed help, and I think that's a trait that I hope I have been able to carry on.
Okay. How many years were your mom and dad married?
My parents got married in 1950, and then, like I said, my dad passed away in 1984. So I want to say that's about, 34 years.
Yeah, 34 years.
So,
And this is a tough question, but how well did your mom adjust to your father's death?
that's an interesting question. It's an interesting question because I've gone through that process now. I'm a widower. My wife passed away. My wife Bronca passed away 6 years ago. And even though I was living in Peoria at the time, I was really oblivious to my mom's condition. I was married. My daughter Rachel was just recently born, and I look back on it now, and I was oblivious. It was my mom. She adjusted. Okay, fine.
So your mom was able to hold the family together.
Well, by that time, all of us were out of the house except for my youngest brother Mark, and he's 15 years younger than I am. So he was still in high school when my dad passed away, and like I said, these are things that I've never really considered.
And where is your mom living today?
My mom still lives in Peoria. She lives in a Independence Valley. She gets around. She doesn't want to move any place, and like you said, she has her friends, she has her community there, and I really, it's really an amazing really an amazing thing because again, there's not a whole lot of family in that area for.
Is your mom in reasonably good health?
Thank God she is. I mean, at 90 years old, you're gonna have some ups and downs. But my mom, she calls me up about every week or every other week to order something for her on Amazon. So I feel very fortunate that that's what I have. That's what I'm dealing with. It's just buying her books to read it from Amazon.
So even at that age, she's adjusted to the Amazon era.
Yeah, my mom is on the computer. She's on Facebook a lot more than I am. And although I'm not going to go into I tried to get her a smartphone, but let's not go there. That was not a happy experience. But my mom does know how to use her cell phone now.
Yeah. Is there a story you could share about your mom from your childhood? Something that still resonates with you?
I can't remember any specific story, to be honest with you. But what amazes me now when I look back is I went to school, elementary school at Whittier Grade School, next to Bradley University. And we went home for lunch. I remember being a crossing guard and helping kids, and my mom would have lunch ready for us. And then we would go back to school. Talk about a neighborhood school, no busing. And it was somewhat of an idyllic existence when I look back. It's a long gone era. But my mom always enjoyed having people over and talking to people. And my mom was liked to make challah. She made challah by hand, and she liked to cook, and there was always food in the house.
I was just going to ask you, what was your favorite meal that your mom fixed?
You know what? I'm not a foodie now, and I wasn't a foodie then, so I just ate.
Was it traditional Jewish?
No, it was all American. It was all American food.
Okay, so they transitioned to American food.
Yeah, they transitioned. Yeah.
Okay.
Meat and potatoes.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to really stretch your memory now. Let's go to your grandparents. What were their names?
My dad's parents were Sam and Molly. Sam, as I said, died in 1946, before I was born. And my grandmother Molly lived in Chicago when I know her. She passed away when she was 80 years old. She was in good health right until the end. And the thing I remember is that she would come down to Peoria on the train, on the Rock Island Rocket. And she would come on the train, and my dad would have to buy beer for her. And that was the only time, that was the only time we ever had beer in the house.
That's a nice memory.
And my grandmother, she liked to cook. She used to make all kinds of rolls and things like that. Like I said, we visited her up in Chicago a number of times. My Uncle Jack had moved her up to Chicago from Peoria, just really when I was an infant. So although she lived in Pekin and Peoria for a long time, I don't have any memories of her down there.
Did you have names for your grandparents? Grammy or Papa?
No. Grandma, Grandpa, that was it. I mean, that was. And then my other, my mom's parents were David and Ethel. And David, they were big Zionists, and I remember having my grandfather was honored by Israel Bonds back in the 50s or 60s, and I remember going to an event. I forgot the event, but they had a picture. They always had a picture of. They had a map of Israel in the dining room. They had a picture with Moshe Dayan, Golda Meir, and Abba Eban in the kitchen, and they never spoke, never discussed politics with them particularly. But I know they were big Zionists and very proud of Israel, and they had a friend. The name escapes me. Who was from Columbia, Missouri, who lived in Columbia, Missouri, who actually drove Golda Meir to the train station in Milwaukee back in 1920.
That's a great story.
That's a great story, and I met them in Israel when I was in Israel in the 1970s. Again, they were professors at the University of Missouri, which again, Columbia was only a 30-minute drive from Jefferson City. My grandfather died 3 weeks after the Yom Kippur War in 1973, so I have a memory of that. So I was getting my grandmother passed away. Ethel. I was already here in Raleigh, and so I'd have to say that would be around 1990, if I remember correctly.
Were your grandparents all born in America?
Well, my grandfather was born, like I said, in Lithuania, and he didn't spend any time in New York. It ended up in Springfield, Illinois, and for whatever reason, he ended up in Jefferson City. I want to say around 1928, and opened up a store there. My mother was born in that year, 1928. And he brought other family, and these are the kind of stories that I wish I had, that of his father, how he got over to America. And I really don't know the stories, and again, that's actually one of the reasons I want to do these podcasts is so that future generations could have those stories that I think enhance our knowledge of our ancestors.
Yeah. And this process, I think, will make you realize things that you want to know more about.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Now, your grandmother. What can you tell us about your grandmother?
My grandmother worked in the store with my grandfather, and she was in charge of the bridal department. And she was the one who handled all the money. It seemed to me she handled all the money. And she did the accounting and bookkeeping. And I was not very much aware of what was happening, but I remember that she was working with an aunt, my aunt bought, and they had a lot of people coming in for weddings to get their wedding gowns. And my uncle, they had the store, they rented out tuxedos at the time. My biggest memories of my grandparents were when we went to Jefferson City from Peoria for the Passover service. We had the Passover with my cousins from St. Louis, and I don't remember. It must have been my cousins from Champaign, Illinois, too. But I don't remember. But we had a Passover. We had a Passover Seder at my grandparents' house, and that was a big event for us. And I remember going shopping in the store there, and I could take this shirt and that shirt, but that was the time that I got to meet my cousins, who are now all over the world right now, and not that much in contact with them.
Okay. Is there anything else? Any other memories you have of your grandparents?
My grandfather, he liked cars, and I learned how to drive. They had an Oldsmobile '98, and it had roll down windows. And I got to drive that car every so often. But my grandparents just had no sense of direction, so they always got left and right mixed up when they were giving me directions. But everything was good. Everything was good.
Were they typical spoil the grandkid type grandparents?
I'd have to say yes at this point. You know, yeah. I mean, I don't remember any of my grandparents ever say, being angry with me or anything else like that, or any of the other grandchildren.
Okay.
But that's
So you have all great memories of
a
them.
lot of great memories.
Let's come forward then, and let's talk about your family now. Tell us about your children.
Well, let me start off with I was married. I was married to Bracha Rosenberg. Bracha's Abib, and she was from Yemen. Her family was from Yemen. She was a first generation Israeli. I was living in Israel. I had just finished the army, and I met Bracha on a 20-mile hike, and she was very petite. I didn't think she noticed me. I had just finished the army, and I tell the story, and she can't. She's passed away, so she can't deny this. That at the time, Bracha was 26 years old, and she thought all Americans were rich, and she saw me, and so she decided that she was going to capture me. So the first time I met Bracha was on a 20-mile hike from the central bus station in Jerusalem to Birkat Shalom, Solomon's Pools. It was a 25-mile hike that would be impossible to do today because of border tension. Actually, Solomon's Pools are actually past the Green Line. There's new settlements there. There's settlements there. And we had two children. We had two children, Rachel and Daniel. Rachel was born on the coldest day ever in Pure, Illinois. I think it was 27 degrees below zero, with a 30-mile-an-hour wind, making it like a wind chill factor of -85. And she was born in Peoria, December 20th, 1984. And then Daniel was born here in Raleigh in February 18th, 1987. And he was married during an ice storm. It was 5 inches of ice, and the roads were very treacherous. And it's a long way from Israel. We don't have that kind of cold weather. And but Brock and I raised, again, two wonderful children.
Steve, it was interesting. You said that Bracha captured you. I suspect you were happy to be captured. Is that correct?
I was young and naive at the time, and I'm glad she did that. I actually want to go back a little bit. Because now that why was I in Israel? Why was I in Israel? Well, it's hard to believe, but when I was in high school and college, you had your choice of going to school, or you had a choice of going to Vietnam. And Vietnam did not look that appealing to me, so I decided to go to school. And I went to the University of Missouri actually for my freshman year, and I decided to go to Hebrew University for my sophomore year, a study abroad. And again, it's hard to remember that going overseas was not as easy as it is today. This was a major voyage, major trip. And I went to Hebrew University because from Peoria, the head of Hebrew University overseas, Sam Rothberg, that's where he lived, and he helped get me in there. In fact, it's called the Rothberg School at Hebrew University, still with a wonderful amphitheater on Mount Scopus in his name. And he was actually a member of the other congregation. There was two Jewish congregations at the time in Peoria, Orthodox and a Reform. And I was the Reform. I was in the Reform, and he was in the Orthodox. But I went to Israel, and I was just a young kid, 19 years old, from Peoria, Illinois, out to see the world. And there I was in Jerusalem, and I had no concept of what I was getting into. And I was so lucky to make friends with a number of Israelis. Nachum Ishkovitz, Herzl Abidor, and Yair Assenheim, who adopted me as a brother. And they took me to their families. I didn't speak a word of Hebrew at the time. And they adopted me. And I became very comfortable in Israel. Then I went back to the States after my year was up. And in my senior year in college, actually, as soon as I got back to the States, the Munich Olympic Massacre in 1972 took place, and that was very traumatic. Then the following year, I was a senior at the University of Illinois, and the Yom Kippur War broke out, and I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back right in the middle of school. And I called up a friend of mine who was at the 1-year program with me, Will Hartfelder. And Will is now he just retired as a minister, Lutheran minister in the Columbus, Ohio area. And Will told me, he says, go back when you can take the place of somebody who didn't. And my uncle, my family said, get your degree and then you can go to Israel. And that's what I did. And Will's roommate was one of those people killed. Yossi Orlov was one of those people who was killed in the Yom Kippur War. So I graduated from University of Illinois, and this might be a surprise to you, but Jerusalem and Tel Aviv were a lot more exciting than Peoria. It was so I was young, carefree, didn't have any expenses, so let's move to Israel. And I served in the army. I tell people I made Beetle Bailey look like Rambo. And the reason I joined the army is because I wanted to live in Israel at the time. And I remember Herzl telling me, he says, you'll go in the army when it's a right and not an obligation. And so I served 18 months in the Israeli army. I was always in combat situations. I was in the West Bank. I was on the Lebanese border. I was in the Golan Heights. And in fact, my unit was one of the first units into Lebanon in 1976. But I tell people that I had what's in Hebrew is called a Rosh Katan, a small head. I just tried to stay out of trouble. And it's one of those things I'm glad I did it now, and I'm glad, but I survived it. So So right after I got out of the Army, actually, one of the reasons I joined the Army was because I was hoping to meet young Israeli women. At the time, there was lots of women soldiers in very short skirts, looked very attractive to me, and they wouldn't even look at me because I'm just. And so I joined the Army, and I found out that was not where they put me. There was no women. They just put those out for the tourist. Uh, but right after I finished the Army, I got a job at the Jerusalem Post as a copy editor, and I met Bracha on this hike. And
Now, when you were in the Army, were you infantry or artillery?
I was artillery, and my job was to lift up these 84-pound shells. It required a strong back and a weak mind, and very little knowledge of Hebrew.
And that's how you developed your physique.
I never thought of it that way. I'm very fortunate that I still have my hearing, but when you're 25, 26, you really don't have to worry about your physique the same way you do when you're 67.
That's for sure. So you left the military, and what year were you and Bracha married?
I want to say 1979. I keep looking at it. It could be on 79. It could be an 80. I'm not exactly sure.
Was this love at first sight, or did this develop?
A little bit of both. Like I said, it's so hard to even imagine these days where nobody had telephones. I would have to go over to a dorm room and knock on the door to see if she was there, which was in a whole different location. And bus rides and everything else, because there was nobody to call. She couldn't call me. I couldn't call her. She didn't speak. Her English was very rudimentary at the time, and my Hebrew was enough to get by. And she moved in with me at a little apartment in the German colony in Jerusalem, and she moved in with me, and we got married, and it was a Yemenite wedding.
Tell us what that means.
Well, it means that this was a wedding that I say was out of National Geographic. My wife did a henna, which is they put the spiced henna on our palms for fertility. At least that's what they told me. People danced around us with baskets of lit candles. And I have very little memory. I have pictures. Thank God for the pictures that I have pictures of me participating in this ceremony. And that was like the if you will, the bachelor party 2 days before the actual wedding, which was done in one of Bracha's relatives' yards, the front yard in Herzliya. We planned our own wedding. The things that I remember is at that time the inflation rate was 180%.
Wow.
And we tried to buy the food and everything else months before the wedding. So we bought all the food, and we had a cook make it, but it was 180% inflation. The currency changed from the Israeli lira to shekels, and it was very. It's hard to remember how perilous those times were. Everybody lived off the bank draft, so we got married. Bracha finished her master's degree in biochemistry, and given Bracha's background. Bracha's mother came from Yemen. Both her parents came from Yemen. Her father came from what I understand, in 1936, took him 6 months to get from Yemen through Egypt, through Ethiopia, and he worked as a from what I understand, I never met him. He worked in the picking oranges in Rehovot, and my mother-in-law, her mother Naomi, came in the Operation Wings of an Eagle, where they brought these Yemenite Jews into the brand new state of Israel, and Naomi, my mother-in-law, came with her stepmother Shoshana, who brought 7 kids over. And the Israel in the 1950s is nothing like the Israel of today. It was a miracle. And so my wife Bracha, there was nobody in her family who really had an education. But she went through the army. She was in intelligence. She wouldn't tell me what she did. She would, and for her to get a degree in biology from Bar Ilan University and then go to Hadassah University in Jerusalem, which is very prestigious, to get her master's, is a pretty significant accomplishment, and shows her determination and persistence and strict, and her intelligence. But again, when I met her, she was 26 years old, and she thought all Americans were rich. Mm-hmm. So she didn't know everything.
Tell us about you and Bracha coming to America and settling in here.
We came to America the day that Ronald Reagan was inaugurated. So that's January 1981. And our plan was to make $1 million in America and then return to Israel within a year, because everybody knew that it was easy to make money in America, especially given the inflation rates and all the economic uncertainty in Israel. And we lived with my parents for a few months in Peoria. They had a big house in Peoria, and I found a job selling copiers, and she found a job with the Red Cross. We moved out of Peoria, and again, Peoria, the 1980s, Caterpillar is headquartered there, Caterpillar Tractor, and it was 20% unemployment. And again, for people who remember, interest rates, mortgages were 20%. And I picked up some odd jobs here and there, but we weren't really happy. And we decided to come to Raleigh. I found a book and said, oh, Raleigh looks like one of the nice places to live. But they have the Research Triangle Park, and they have all these pharmaceutical companies. At the time, it was Burroughs Wellcome. And so Bracha won't have any problem finding the job, and I'll figure out what's happening. So we moved to Raleigh in 1984. We've been down here ever since.
Okay. And did both of you find jobs when you moved here?
She found a job in RTP as a lab technician, and I found a job selling copiers, which didn't last that long. And my experience, so I lived in Israel for most of the 1970s. And as I mentioned, I served in the army. And that experience made me unwilling to work for somebody else. I tell people that the one lesson I learned in the Israeli army was a quote from I think it's Proverbs, This is the day the Lord has made. Come and rejoice in it. And so I didn't want to work for somebody and be miserable. And I ended up trying to become an entrepreneur. And there was some good days and there was some bad days, some lean days. But I've been working for myself for over 35 years now.
And what do you do now?
I have a little direct mail marketing business out of my garage. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to earn enough money and with an honest doing an honest work, and I'm very proud of what I've accomplished that. But it wasn't easy. It's still not. But my Army experience is what gave me the impetus to to go on my own. Again, I look back at the Army, and again, I was I was not the greatest soldier, but the lessons I learned were that life is short, and I've maintained that, and I enjoy what I do, and again, I feel very fortunate about that.
Steve, I know this will be very emotional for you to talk about, but I think it's important to talk about Braca's illness.
Whew. Braca looked like she was gaining weight. This is gaining weight. Didn't really understand what was happening. And my friend, she went to the doctor. Went to the doctor or general physician and said, "Oh, you have constipation." And we have a friend, Michelle Hensley, who's a doctor. And she said, "No, you need to go check this out." And lo and behold, Braca went for a test, and they said she's got cancer, ovarian cancer. And that was Thanksgiving of 2010. And the diagnosis came the day that Friday, that Monday after Thanksgiving, the same day that Daniel was getting ready to leave for the Israeli army. Daniel had just finished school in Israel at IDC in Herzliya, had his degree, and we did not want him to go to the army, being a lone soldier, but Daniel persisted. The one thing about all my family members, my wife, myself, my kids, we're all stubborn. And Daniel wanted to do his thing, and as they say in Yiddish, gesundheit, hey, do it in health, and Daniel, so Braca was diagnosed right there in November 2010, and immediately started chemotherapy. And we had not, until that day, we had not had any contact, particularly with the medical profession. Thank God I had insurance as a small businessman. Braca worked for me at the time, and Braca went to Israel a couple of times when she was sick. I went with her twice. I think I went with her twice. But Braca never complained. She was always very stoic. She was always very tough. But going through that experience of being with a loved one who going through cancer, and being with her was it just makes me realize how precious life is, and how grateful I am that I do have my health. I don't take that for granted because I know it can change. It can change in an instant, like it did with Bracha. And Bracha, it'll be 6 years here next month that she passed away. She last, she lived, she wanted to survive her 61st birthday, and she died 2 days after her 61st birthday on July 5th, 2013. Um, and
I know that's tough to talk about.
it is.
Where is Braca buried?
Bracha is buried here in Raleigh at the Jewish cemetery. And one of the little things is the Jews have a tradition of when you go to a cemetery, you don't see flowers so much, but you see stones that you put on the grave to show that you were there. But instead of doing stones, Bracha liked to collect seashells. So we had a whole bunch of seashells. I said, what are we doing with all these things? When we go to the beach, she bring these seashells back. So over the years, I put seashells at her grave, and now it looks like it was a part of an aquarium. So that's it's just a little thing.
Well, that's a great way to remember her and how much you loved her. Is there anything else? I know this is tough. Anything else you'd like to share about Braca? Just take a minute.
It's hard. The wedding, my son Daniel was just married here a few months ago, on March 27th. So, to a lovely girl, to a lovely woman, Marguerite. Whew. And it's a shame. Phew. The Braca could see it.
But you were able to honor her memory at the wedding, weren't you?
Yes, we did mention it.
Okay. Let's talk about your children. Which child was first?
Rachel was born, like you said, Peoria, Illinois, 1984. And Rachel has been all over the world. She likes to travel. And she lived and she got a degree in accounting from Appalachian State and got a job right away in Washington, D.C. And she's been in Washington, D.C. for, I want to say since 2007 now. So it's 12 years. Mm. And she worked for a company that she's very happy with, NRECA, and I'm not exactly sure what those initials, something electric co-ops. And she likes to travel a lot, and again, I'm very proud of her. Daniel decided to live in Israel, and he's worked with firms that are doing marketing here in America. Again, I look back when I was in Israel back in the 70s. I called my parents once every 6 months or so. It was a major commitment. I had to send aerograms. Okay, I'm going to call on such and such a date. I had to go to the post office. It was $3 a minute. And now it's okay. I just pick up the cell phone. Hi, Daniel. How you doing? On WhatsApp. But that's. But Daniel's living in Israel. He's a newlywed. and thank God he's doing well.
Let's talk about Rachel's childhood. Was she a very good student, very bright child?
Both. What do you expect? Yes, Rachel. Rachel was always very self assured, very contained. I would say shy, but she's always confident. But she's not one to gossip or talk a lot. So Rachel, so that's Rachel's personality. She's very determined. She's very focused. She's very bright.
Did she like sports?
No, she didn't like sports.
Not really.
She has no concept of it. As did my wife. My wife could care less. No, Rachel's not into sports. On the other hand, Daniel played football at Millbrook High School. And again, for a Jewish kid, there's not that many Jewish kids in Millbrook. There was, a handful of them. And Daniel was one of the only Jewish kid that I know of who was playing football here in the Raleigh area. So
it's safe to say you don't get to see your kids enough, but when you see them, you enjoy it.
yeah. So I feel very fortunate. I feel very grateful that my kids are healthy and self-sufficient, and I remember asking a friend a long time ago. He said, going to Rachel's college graduation, and I said, it's Anita Berman, and I said to Anita, Anita, am I lucky or did I do something right? And Anita looks at me and says, Brooke, I did everything right. You were just lucky. So that's how I feel. And I like I said, very fortunate. Feel very fortunate. But again, I don't take these things for granted.
No. We haven't said anything yet about your family, brothers and sisters.
We were raised Reform in Peoria, Illinois, and I'm the only one who became a little bit Orthodox, more. My other brothers, I have my brother in Toronto, Michael, is very pro-Israel. But my other siblings really have no regard for that, and again, based on my year at Hebrew University in 71, 72, and my military service in the Israeli army, I have a very strong commitment to Israel and the Jewish people, which I'm very proud of, and something that motivates me to do this podcast and to do other activities trying to promote Israel. Because right now, what I see, it's very turbulent times. And hey, it's rough. I don't know what it's going to be.
Steve, I want you to have some time to talk about whatever you feel that we've left out, anything that you think is important. This is your time.
One of the things that we forgot to mention that I think has been important in my life is Toastmasters. And I joined Toastmasters actually before my daughter was born. So that's 1983. And having that camaraderie, learning those communication skills have been an important part of my life and for my business, to maintain the business, to have the friendships. And again, I feel very blessed to have good friends, good health, but I don't take it for granted. And that's...
And I think you've mentioned your children became involved in Toastmasters?
For a while. My daughter was a charter member of the club that I'm a member of, Raleigh Talkmasters, and Daniel was in it while he lived here in Raleigh. He was in the thing. So my kids did see my learning and education. Actually, Bracha also was a member of Toastmasters for a while. So because I think that I know that the ability to communicate is just absolutely so critical in today's world, and that's what I'm trying to do.
So Toastmasters was an additional support system for you, as well as the Jewish community.
Exactly.
Okay.
So,
anything else you'd like to add?
I'm good.
Well, this is the Jewish Legacy podcast, and Stephen J. Rosenberg has been the guest. And thank you so much for listening.